Hi friend, come on in. Puff pastry looks complicated. It is flaky, buttery, and full of delicate layers, which makes it feel like something that only professionals should attempt. But it does not have to be intimidating. Today, I am making a quick rough puff pastry that comes together with just a few ingredients and a little patience between folds. It bakes up flaky, layered, and sturdy enough for both sweet and savory recipes. If you have ever wanted puff pastry but didn't want the long traditional process, this method is a great place to start, and it only takes a few ingredients. Rough puff pastry works because we trap thin layers of butter inside the dough. As the pastry bakes, the water in the butter turns to steam and pushes those layers apart. This is what creates the lift and the flakiness. The goal of this whole process is simply to keep the butter in distinct sheets while building layers in the dough. To begin, add 250 grams of flour, which is about 2 cups, to a mixing bowl along with half a teaspoon of salt. This amount of salt is appropriate when using unsalted butter. If you are using salted butter, you can reduce the salt slightly. In pastry, the butter remains in distinct layers rather than fully mixed into the dough, so seasoning the flour helps ensure the flavor is evenly distributed. Next comes the butter. I am starting with a cold block straight from the fridge. I cut it in half, then slice it into thin pats, lightly flouring the knife as I go to keep it from sticking. I aim for thin slices, but not paper thin. These slices are going to become our layers, so their shape matters. Thin, flat pieces give you those distinct sheets without a lot of extra work. This is one of those recipes where the butter flavor really comes through. If you have a good butter, this is a great place to use it. I don't usually buy expensive butter, but I found this Kerrygold on clearance and jumped on it. I'm not loyal to brands, but I am loyal to clearance finds. Many recipes call for cubing the butter, but cutting it into thin pieces saves time and handling. The shape already resembles the layers we are trying to create. Because the butter starts out flat, it naturally forms sheets when the dough is rolled instead of requiring extra work to flatten cubes later. That means less mixing, less heat transfer from your hands, and a better chance of keeping the butter cold. Cold butter is key here. As I cut the butter, I toss the pieces in the flour so they stay separated. The flour acts as a barrier and keeps the butter pieces from sticking together in clumps. Once all the butter is added, give everything a gentle toss so the pieces are coated with flour. At this stage, we are not trying to break the butter down. The pieces should remain whole and visible. Now add cold water. I usually start with 4 to 6 tablespoons. The goal is to hydrate most of the flour while leaving the butter intact. You are looking for a dough that holds together when pressed but still has a few dry spots. Do not be afraid to add a little more water if needed. Flour absorbs moisture differently depending on the brand, humidity, and even the temperature of your kitchen. When I started pressing the dough together today, it felt slightly too dry. So I added 2 more tablespoons of water and that brought everything together nicely. A slightly wetter dough is easier to roll and fold later. Since we will be using flour on the counter during rolling, the dough will naturally pick up what it needs. Once the dough comes together, turn it out onto a piece of plastic wrap and press it into a rough rectangle. Yes, it will look shaggy and uneven, and that is completely normal. The flour has not fully hydrated yet, and the butter pieces are still loose. Trust the process. Wrap this mess up and place it in the fridge for at least 20 minutes. This rest allows the flour to absorb moisture and the butter to firm up again. After chilling, unwrap the dough and place it on a lightly floured surface. It will still look rough, but this is where the layering begins. Roll the dough into a rectangle as best you can and perform a letter fold. Bring one side of the dough about 1/3 of the way in, then fold the other side over the top. This simple fold instantly multiplies the number of layers inside the dough. Turn the dough 90 degrees and roll it out again. At this point, you can repeat the letter fold or perform a book fold, where both sides fold towards the center and then the dough closes like a book. Use flour as needed to prevent sticking, but not so much that the dough cannot stick to itself during the folds. Occasionally, a butter layer may reach the surface and make things a little bit sticky. A bench scraper is helpful for lifting and moving the dough without tearing it. If at any point the butter feels soft, wrap the dough and chill it again. Keeping the butter firm is what preserves those layers. After the first round of folds, wrap the dough and refrigerate it for another 20 minutes or longer. Once chilled again, repeat the rolling and folding process 2 more times, turning the dough 90 degrees between each set of folds. The exact fold style does not matter too much. A letter fold triples the number of layers, while a book fold multiplies them even more. Each round builds structure and flakiness. After the final fold, wrap the dough and chill it for at least an hour. At this point, the rough puff pastry is ready to use or freeze for later. You may already have a recipe in mind, but if you don't, here are 2 simple ways to put it to work. For a savory option, try cheese twists. Roll the dough into a rectangle, brush the surface with egg, and sprinkle generously with cheese. Fold the dough in half, cut it into strips, and twist each strip before placing it on a baking sheet. Bake at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius for about 25 minutes until golden and crisp. For a sweet version, roll the dough and cut the folded edges off the dough so the layers are exposed. Cut edges puff more freely, while folded edges tend to stay compressed. Cut it into squares to make small pastry puffs. For the cheese twists, I didn't cut the fold, and that one unrolled, opening like a book and causing the cheese to brown more. The scraps do not need to go to waste. They can be twisted with cinnamon sugar or left plain and baked alongside the pastries. For the squares, you can dip them in dusting sugar now or sprinkle some on later. It will stick better now and look more impressive. Either place a small heat-proof ramekin in the center or lightly score a circle to mark the filling area. Bake the pastry squares at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius for about 15 minutes. Then remove the ramekins if you used them and add your filling. I am using lemon curd today. Return the pastries to the oven for another 10 minutes to finish baking and set the filling. When the pastry comes out of the oven, the layers are clearly visible and beautifully puffed. The texture is crisp and delicate, and the layers shatter when pressed. This is exactly what we want from puff pastry. It is impressive to look at, all buttery and crisp. These are best enjoyed fresh before the pastry loses its crisp texture. Cutting the butter into flat pieces helps this dough come together quickly with minimal handling. Instead of pressing cold cubes into sheets later, the butter already starts in the shape we want. With just a few folds and some chill time, those layers multiply and bake into a flaky pastry that feels far more complicated than it really is. And once you see how easily this comes together, you may find yourself reaching for homemade puff pastry more often than you expected.